Hello! On June 17, 2016, the peaceful atmosphere of a small town was shattered by the roar of vehicles and the deafening sound of gunfire. 150 heavily armed gunmen suddenly descended, their target clear and ruthless, the home of El Chapo's mother. They didn't come to loot, but to carry out a single deadly mission: to kill the woman who had given birth to Mexico's most notorious criminal. Fortunately, she wasn't there, but this attack was only the tip of the iceberg in a series of bloody plots targeting the families of drug lords as the power struggle between rival gangs became increasingly brutal. On July 12, 2020, Juan Francisco El Brujo Herrera, a kingpin of the Sinaloa cartel, was brutally executed alongside his wife and young daughter by the Caborca cartel. Although Caborca wasn't a widely known name in Mexico's criminal underworld, but it had been an ally of the Sinaloa cartel for decades. Rafael Caro Quintero, leader of the Caborca cartel, was once a close friend of El Chapo Guzman, and Caborca had acted as an extension of El Chapo's will, executing his every command. One of their darkest missions was the murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in 1984. After the Mexican government conducted a massive raid on El Buffalo, a marijuana plantation worth over $160 million, with intelligence provided by Kiki, the drug cartels, including Sinaloa and Caborca, were enraged. Caro Quintero, a notorious figure in the Caborca cartel, personally took charge of killing the agent, turning him into a primary target for the U.S. government. Over time, El Chapo was captured and extradited to the U.S., leaving a power vacuum within the Sinaloa cartel. His sons, Alfredo Guzman Salazar and Ivan Archivaldo Salazar, along with Ismael El Mayo, Zambada, and El Chapitos, took control. However, this created friction with Caro Quintero, the boss of Caborca. Tensions escalated and eventually led to the death of Santiago Eduardo, Quintero's nephew, at the hands of the Sinaloa cartel. This betrayal drove Quintero mad. Santiago hadn't been deeply involved in the drug trade, yet his blood was spilled. People whispered, if El Chapo were alive, this would never have happened. And for revenge, it was said Quintero would stop at nothing, leaving no stone unturned. His next target was El Brujo, a powerful drug lord of the Sinaloa cartel who had escaped the law many times under El Chapo's protection. But on that fateful day of June 17th, everything changed. Under the scorching sun of Sonora, El Brujo's truck carrying his wife and two young daughters was suddenly ambushed by a group of ruthless assassins. The air was torn apart by the heavy rifle fire, and as blood began to spill, El Brujo knew this time he wouldn't escape. He was shot multiple times before his truck crashed into a streetlight. His wife and two daughters also met their grim fate, and several others in the vehicle were gravely injured. This attack marked the end of the alliance between the Sinaloa and Caborca cartels, igniting a bloody war that no one could stop. At 10 a.m. in Guaymas, Sonora, Mexico, the stifling border heat grew even more oppressive. El Brujo's Ford truck rolled slowly along the dusty road. Inside were his wife, two young daughters, and a few trusted companions. None of them realized death was lurking just seconds away. In the distance, an old taxi hurtled towards them like lightning blocking their path. The taxi doors flew open, and in an instant, the deafening sounds of gunfire rang out. The heavy rifles of the assassins in the taxi, determined to kill El Brujo at all costs. Bullets rained down on the Ford, tearing the car apart in an instant. El Brujo struggled to take control of the wheel, but his hands were already soaked in blood from the fatal wounds inflicted by the gunfire. His last attempt was to crash the vehicle into a lamppost, but that did nothing to save his wife and daughters, who had already fallen under the hail of bullets. El Brujo, once deemed invincible, now lay motionless, left amid a chaotic scene of spent shell casings and blood. The others in the car were gravely injured, but this attack wasn't merely to eliminate him. It officially marked the beginning of a new war, a bloody power struggle between the Sinaloa and Caborca cartels. The deeper cause of this incident was none other than Santiago Eduardo, the nephew of Caborca cartel boss Rafael Caro Quintero. Although Santiago had never been deeply involved in the criminal world, but he became a victim of the sins his father, Ruben Payan Quintero, also known as El Gringo, had committed. His father was a notorious drug lord working with his brother for the Caborca cartel. Although there was no sign Santiago had any involvement with the cartel, but the crimes his father had committed were enough for rival gangs to seek to destroy him. In Mexico, the primary target for all other gangs was the Caborca cartel, as it brazenly ruled politics and engaged heavily in meth distribution, extortion, kidnapping, and arms trafficking. On June 24, 2015, after Santiago's father was captured by the Mexican Navy, Santiago went into hiding, trying to avoid any conflict. However, fate had other plans. During a fateful night at a party, when laughter filled the air and music blared, a group of assassins suddenly stormed in. Gunfire shattered the joy, and the party turned into a bloody nightmare. Santiago, with panic in his eyes, fled the crowd, trying to reach his Jeep Rubicon, but his enemies didn't miss their chance. They chased him across the city, relentlessly firing intent on extinguishing the flickering flame of his life. Finally, they caught up to him. Bullets pierced through the windows and struck Santiago, causing blood to pour over the car seat. When rescuers arrived, Santiago was barely alive, but he passed away the next morning at 11:15. These bloody deaths were not just the result of personal vendettas, but were the inevitable outcome of the power struggle between Mexico's biggest cartels. Then, on August 13, 2020, another chapter of this tragedy unfolded. Cesar Carrillo Leyva, the son of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, nicknamed the Lord of the Skies, was murdered in front of his garage by hitmen sent by El Chapo's sons. Cesar's death was a bloody warning to anyone who dared challenge El Chapo's power. Amado Carrillo was once a notorious drug lord, the first to transport cocaine via cargo planes from Colombia to Mexico, building an empire worth $25 billion before his death in 1997 from a botched plastic surgery. Though Amado was gone, but the remnants of his empire lingered, sparking a prolonged war between the cartels for control over the border and lucrative drug markets. Cesar's death was just one piece of the chaotic puzzle that made up this war, where there was no room for mercy or compassion. On April 1st, 2009, as the shadows of the drug war began to subside, Cesar Carrillo Leyva received the order to take over his father's vast drug network. This was not a simple transfer of power. It was a dark moment when violence erupted, lurking in every alley and border. His brother Vicente Carrillo Leyva had been arrested for drug trafficking, and Cesar was immediately thrust into the whirlwind of power and hatred, where any minor mistake could cost him his life. At this point, the Sinaloa cartel had already gained control of the border, but El Chapo and his henchmen relentlessly pursued Cesar, forcing him to live in fear, unable to reveal his identity. Unexpectedly, in 2011 his name was exposed when a series of banners appeared across Chihuahua, announcing the formation of the new Juarez cartel. These banners not only declared the emergence of this new cartel, but also thrust Cesar into the spotlight, making him a target for all criminal enemies. 7 years later, despite his efforts to remain hidden, Cesar was captured by the Mexican Navy. However, thanks to the cartel's influence within the government, he was almost immediately released. This hidden power not only saved his life, but also helped him negotiate the release of his brother Vicente in 2018, followed by the release of his two other brothers, Luis Fernando Carrillo and Juan Carrillo Leyva. Luis Fernando, who had been involved in the murder of Sonora model Ambar Dolores, received only a light sentence, further evidence of the Carrillo family's influence in manipulating the Mexican legal system. However, Cesar's luck did not last forever. On August 13th, 2020, death came knocking at his door in Navolato, Sinaloa. Before his death, a mysterious car had been parked outside his house for several hours. When Cesar stepped out of his garage, gunfire erupted like a storm of fire. The assassin gave him no chance to retaliate, coldly firing multiple shots that pierced through his body, causing Cesar to collapse. Though he had a brief window of time before help arrived, by the time the police and paramedics reached the scene, Cesar had already passed away, succumbing to internal bleeding from his fatal wounds. The assassination immediately sent shockwaves through the public, and all fingers pointed in one direction: Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo. Ivan Archibald de Guzman Salazar, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, and their two half-brothers, Ovidio Guzman Lopez and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, were believed to have ordered Cesar's execution as revenge for the death of their brother, Edgar Guzman, who had been chosen by El Chapo as his successor, but was brutally killed in 2008. Edgar's death was not merely an internal purge, but a result of bloody calculations between the cartels. El Chapo, always placing his interests first, had secretly made deals with the DEA and the Mexican government. He sold out information on other drug lords, including his own, in exchange for immunity for his family and organization. This move led to the capture of Alfredo Beltran Leyva, one of the top commanders of the Beltran Leyva cartel, and from there, the war between the two cartels escalated. Edgar, El Chapo's beloved son, was born in 1986 and was the one El Chapo had entrusted with the future of his drug empire. Unlike his other children, Edgar had been shielded from the brutal underworld until he completed his education. However, in 2008, Edgar chose to step into the world of drug trafficking after producing his first gram of cocaine. But his inexperience and lack of street smarts made him an easy target. El Chapo had warned Edgar not to leave Mexico due to threats from the Beltran Leyva cartel, but Edgar ignored this warning. He and his cousin, Cesar Ariel Loera Guzman, along with his girlfriend, traveled to Chicago to smuggle cocaine. On their return to Mexico, tragedy struck. As they were leaving a shopping center, a group of gunmen appeared and opened fire on the SUV Edgar was in. Over 450 rounds were fired, and even a bazooka was used to ensure that both Edgar and his cousin were killed on the spot. Edgar's death was a severe blow to El Chapo's pride. In retaliation, he organized a grand funeral, buying up all the roses in Culiacan to bid farewell to his son. But behind the outward show of grief was the quiet preparation for a relentless war, a battle that would not stop until all his enemies were destroyed. After Edgar's death, El Chapo's pain and fury surged like a violent wave, leading to a bloody purge. He ordered the killing of over 116 people in Culiacan before the end of May 2008. By June, that number had soared to over 128, and in July, the bodies piled up with over 143 people murdered. Despite how many purges El Chapo commanded, but the pain of losing his son remained like a dagger lodged deep in his heart, never to be soothed. At Edgar's funeral, Griselda Lopez Perez, Edgar's mother, gave an emotional speech. Her tears mixed with the anguish of a mother who had lost her child. Speaking with a trembling yet resolute voice, she said, "I, as a mother, am so tired of my children being labeled as drug traffickers. I lost a child to wars that they created." Her words not only touched the hearts of those present, but also seemed like a declaration of defiance against the criminal world that had claimed her son. As one of the most notorious drug lords in Mexico, El Chapo's family always lived under the threat of violence. One of the most brutal attacks targeting his family occurred on June 17, 2016. Though El Chapo believed in the safety of his hometown and his mother, trusting that Bienvenidos a la Tuna was the safest place, but he was gravely mistaken. A group of 150 gunmen from the Beltran Leyva cartel stormed the small village where El Chapo's mother lived, splitting into teams to carry out the ambush. Luckily, she wasn't home at the time. Even so, the attackers didn't hold back. They ransacked the house, stole 3 luxury cars, 3 motorcycles, and cut off all communication lines with the outside world. Screams echoed throughout the village as panic spread among the locals. One group of assassins dragged a man out of his home, tortured him, and murdered him in front of the terrified villagers, leaving the town blanketed in fear and brutality. This attack wasn't just a massacre. It was a message from the Beltran Leyva cartel, led by Fausto Isidro Mesa Flores, also known as Chapito. A notorious drug trafficker since the 2000s, Chapito sided with the Beltran Leyva cartel after splitting from El Chapo in 2008. Not only was he a ruthless killer, but he also led the Mazatlecos gang, running his criminal operations from Guasave. Joined by members from Familia Michoacana, the Zetas, the Gulf Cartel, and Beltran Leyva, Chapito was determined to take El Chapo's mother's life, seeing it as part of the brutal power struggle. Though they failed to capture her, but the bloodshed caused by the Beltran Leyva cartel only escalated tensions between the cartels, and the war raged on with no signs of stopping. The lives of El Chapo and his family would forever be haunted by these horrific attacks and the relentless cycle of revenge from their enemies. What do you think of this story? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below for everyone to read. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.